Okay, so bottom of the hour, we're going to get started up. Welcome to another episode of Think with a Drink, the weekly webinar series brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. This week, we are doing financial wellness. What does it mean to you? I mean, is really the conversation about what that means in general and how everybody sort of sees that and views that. A little housekeeping here before we get started up. Just know the event's being recorded, but no reason to block your camera or your image because it's only what's being shown on the screen. There is a chat box, so if you do have any questions, you can drop them in. My co-pilot, who I won't introduce in a second, has abandoned me for this evening, so I will mention him, but there's nobody here to drive a ship along with me. Speaking of that, your pilots for tonight, I'm Tom Alessi, so I'm going to be the only one who's going to be presenting this evening. I'm the president of the Aries Foundation. I've been in financial services for 23 years now. I'm an investment advisor, which means I act in a fiduciary capacity whenever dealing with any of my clients or giving any advice. Normally, Craig would be joining me. He's my vice president. He is off tonight, so it's just me. So be kind in terms of the people out there in the world. Just know this is brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. We are a nonprofit. You can visit our website. It's www.ariesfoundation.org. The mission behind Aries is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. Because whether you realize it or not, you are in a relationship with your money. And just like every other personal relationship that you might have, there are emotions and behaviors and triggers that happen that can cause us to act. Sometimes what Craig and I usually like to say is irrationally when we're dealing with our money and our finances. I'm not going to go through the disclosures because there's too many of them, but just know that just the idea here is we're a nonprofit. This is meant to be purely educational and information. And if you share these, just do it in an educational manner, which gets us to the fun part of the evening. We call this Think with a Drink. The reason we call it Think with a Drink is we want to have this be in a very relaxed and casual atmosphere. And we can't think of a better way to do that than as if you have something cold to sip on and just imbibe as you're sitting back and listening to it. Tonight, I am drinking, this is Voodoo Ranger from New Belgium. This is a juicy, hazy IPA, as they like to say. It's a more tropical blast and definitely hazy with the you can smell that in terms of the aroma with that. But I want to say to everybody out there, skål. All right, so the agenda for this evening, what is financial wellness anyway? Ways of dealing with money, money personalities, and understanding how those personalities can affect our behavior. And then we'll wrap it up from there. So financial wellness, funny, the reason I wanted the hazy IPA or anything hazy in that point is because everybody has a different definition of financial wellness. One of the missions, one of the reasons that Craig and I put Aries together is that this whole idea of financial wellness was really very tech heavy, and it still is and continues to be very tech heavy. There's apps and tools and calculators out there. There's hundreds of them. The problem is they're not driving engagement. And so for Craig and I, the idea behind this is that we really believe that financial wellness is a contact sport and that you really need to have engagement and guidance and advice in order to drive participation. So everybody's got a different definition. Everybody's got a different view on it. We just feel that, for us, it's really more about trying to connect with people. But if we're looking at it from a broad, high overview into what actually financial wellness means, one of the first things that comes up is, that can you cover an emergency? Right? Because this is one of the things that really sort of drives that whole idea of I'm okay, right? So when you look at it, nearly half of Americans wouldn't be able to cover a $400 emergency. And that lack of savings is an anxiety for many people. And whether that's a medical emergency, an unexpected expense, a job loss, property damage, stuff happens all the time. But you want to have that emergency fund. And we talk about that's got to be the first thing when you're building out a savings plan is to be funding that emergency reserves. the industry standard has always been 3 to 6 months of expenses. Coming out of the pandemic and COVID, Craig and I talked to everybody, it's about really having about 6 weeks, really 4 to 6 weeks, somewhere in that 1 to 1.5 months, just have something that's there, that's set aside. This is an emergency reserve fund. It should not be tied into your savings or your checking account. It should be a separate bucket. It's meant there for when everything else that you really have to dip into something for that unexpected expense. If you don't have that set aside right now, that's where you have to start building out that goal. We'll talk about some of that as we go forward here, but this is the first thing. The first part in that checkup, if you will, that's how I should have done it, as a checkup for financial wellness. Can you cover an emergency? The next one is spending habits that support your values. And, so every dollar that you spend should get you closer to really who or what you want to be, right? Not so much, hey, I'm blowing my money, but just understand I'm spending it with something in mind, a value in mind that I'm trying to gain. And, the idea is to sort of take a look at what you spend money on. I always talk to people about tracking their expenses. A lot of times it's writing it down and making a journal and sort of understanding, how you felt when you spent the money, right? So it's sort of go back and look at it, maybe take next week and just not during the week, but at the end of the week, go back and look at everything that you spend and sort of get an understanding of how you felt about each of those items. Because that's what's going to be important, understanding how you're spending your money, but where you're spending it and what you're spending it on. Because sometimes we're doing it to, overcome or dissuade a negative that's going on in our world, but that we don't really attach happiness to it. It makes us feel better at the moment, but then a day or two later, it makes us feel worse. And we'll talk about that when we get into the money personalities. So you want to be looking at this and understanding how you're spending your money, where it is, and is it really going towards who you are as an individual? Confidence and control. One of the things I think we get all the time is people saying, I'm not good with money. It usually just means they haven't taken the time, or had the opportunity to develop the skill. Successful money management is just like doing anything else, right? You got to practice it. You got to put it in place. You got to say, I'm going to do this. And yeah, we get it. People feel like I don't want to make a mistake, so I'm not going to do that. Well, the only way we ever get better at something is by doing. And so you got to try. You got to step in. You got to try, and you probably do it every day without realizing it. You make decisions with money all the time. Everybody does. It's just we tend to push off those larger or more involved decisions because we feel like, oh, we're not experienced enough or we can't handle it. When the reality is you probably could, you just haven't tried or haven't put your mind to it to say, oh, gee, I do that all the time. Sure, I handle that. Like I balance a checkbook or I do this at work and handle these things that work the same way. So having confidence and feeling in control is a big part of financial wellness. Staying on track. So, we talk about knowing where you're spending, about having a goal, about making smart goals all the time. And this is one of those ongoing, little goals to get to a larger goal, to get you in track to what you're trying to get to, ultimately is what it's all about, right? So you've got to have that end goal in mind. Now, like we talked about, one of that might be, I'm trying to build up money in the bank. I know I should have 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside, but I don't have, I got maybe a few $100s right now. Well, maybe the goal is as we go through the end of the year here, that you're going to keep that same amount, i.e. not go crazy on the holidays with spending. And then beginning in the new year, I'm going to start building that up and maybe try to get, $1,000 by the end of the first quarter. And then try to add on another 1,000 in the next quarter. That type of savings goal. I'm going to have a certain amount in there by a certain time frame, and this is how I'm going to do it. But the only way that's ever going to happen is if you know what you're spending. And that goes back to some of what we talked about, having control, having an understanding, and understanding what you're spending, right? It's just having that fundamental part of it. And lastly, it's not being crippled by debt, right? Money's the number one cause of stress for most adults, right? And really the idea is it's all about, whether or not I've got enough. And we'll talk about that with the personalities coming up. But a lot of financial stress stems from having debt, specifically credit card debt or other type of those debt, related issues. And the only way that you're ever going to get out of or away from debt is to have a plan to put it in place. We subscribe to either the math or the momentum methods for dealing with debt, and math just says I'm taking the highest interest rate, whatever it is, whatever the balance is, and that's where I'm directing all of my money. That's where I'm going to focus on paying that one first. I'll make the minimum payments on everything else, but all the other money that I've been applying to my debt is going to pay down that one first. It works. Craig and I happen to subscribe to the idea of momentum is better. And what momentum says is I'm going to take all of my debt that I am currently paying. I'm going to pay the minimum on everything, but the smallest balance that I have, the card with the debt with the least amount on it, that's where I'm going to focus all of my payments, and I'm going to get that one paid first. So once I get that one paid, now I can take all of that money that I was spending there and move it on to the next one. There's a psychological trigger that happens when we accomplish something. We realize we're in control now, like we talked about before. We realize that we're part of this. We can make this happen, and this sets us in motion. It also starts us on a saving path because now we can see how we can be building up by paying down this debt at the same time. So, and we'll talk about some of the personalities that get us in trouble with that in a second and go through it. But understanding that debt is one of those stressors, and that's a big cause for problems with a lot of people. All right, so the money personalities. There are 7 different types of money personalities. These are how Craig and I break it out, how the foundation looks at money personalities. You have, and I'll go through each one of them, talk about what they mean, the personality themselves, and then a little bit how to, why it could be a problem and how to balance that out. So that's what we're going to do for each one of these. You have the pack rat, the money hippie, the spendthrift, the money hustler, the gambler, it's a roller coaster rider, and the worrywart, basically, for those 7. All right, so the pack rat, right? The pack rat is just what it sounds like. This is somebody who likes to save. Now, we've talked about the fact that having money in the bank, having funds available, having those emergency reserves, this is all a good thing, right? This is an individual who will pay themselves first, which is something Craig and I really, really talk to everybody about. You got to pay your must-pay expenses, but then you pay yourself, then you have your discretionary spending. So a lot of good habits from the pack rat point of view, right? But also somebody who, the minute something gets spent, has got to think about getting it back in there, right? I got to have that back up. I got to replenish it, right? Somebody who is very fiscally responsible, very prudent, and really is going to be very hesitant about trying to overspend or spending more or going through that, right? So where do the drawbacks come in? Well, the problem with the pack rat is you tend to not enjoy spending money. It feels painful sometimes to actually spend money. Like you're not getting the enjoyment out of it. And you really, worry that oh, gee, you're spending it. So So whatever enjoyment was going to come from that gets taken away by the fact that you're sort of seeing the dollar signs or seeing the money fly out of your head. How to balance it, right? So, everything is like anything to be taken in moderation. But, we always talk about what's in your buckets when we talk about savings, having emergency reserves, having a midterm fund, having a long-term bucket in terms of savings plans. In this case, it might be breaking it even more so, having that. All right, I've got an emergency reserves. Maybe I've got a rainy day fund. Maybe I've got a gifting fund, right? That, so you're charitably inclined and you want to do that. Then I've got maybe one that's in a vacation fund, like so that you break it out into little tinier buckets and just know now it's okay to spend it. I'm spending that, whatever you call it, the vacation money or the crazy fund or whatever you want to call it, right? And just break them out that way so that you can say, all right, I can spend that one. That's okay. Because I know I've got my other stuff over here and I'm not worried about it. That's the one I'm supposed to be enjoying, right? By sort of offsetting this, you're going to alleviate some of that guilt. It's going to allow you to enjoy spending your money. Oh, the money hippie, right? You, dude. So money hippies really don't want to talk about money, right? It's almost like being allergic. Money issues really just it's not their thing. They don't want to get into it, and they really don't want to ever get into any confrontation or anything dealing with money, right? They're more of the, it is what it is. I've got what I got. I'm good, right? And you're really not worrying about it, not worrying about what needs to be paid or what needs to be done. And you really don't want to have money be that influence, right? You don't want to feel like, oh, gee, I'm doing something because of money, whether it's in a positive or a negative. You just sort of push it off to the side. The drawback is you tend not to take responsibilities for your money. So that puts you in a situation of being dependent on somebody else when it comes through your overall finances, right? And, for a money hippie, the idea is that you should have, and I'm not going to use the word budget because that's going to be, way too controlling for a hippie to deal with. But, tracking, just understanding what's being paid, when, what bills are due, when it's done, maybe balancing the checkbook type of thing. But, little incremental steps of just understanding and getting used to and feeling, okay, we talked about that idea of confidence and control. Some of that applies here with the hippie to say, hey, you need some of that control, to understand what's being spent, when it's being spent, how it's being spent, not necessarily to constrain you to a budget, but just so that you have an idea. And that way you can open up some conversation with whether it's a spouse, whether it's a significant other, about some of the spending, some of the money, what's happening and where it's going. So the spendthrift, right? This is somebody who just enjoys spending money. And there's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of times it's meant as that like immediate gratification type of thing. Like sometimes that we're, think of this as spree buyers or, impulse buyers, people who are buying, in emotional times. Like I just, I'm a largesse, I'm going to buy, hey, I'll buy a round for everybody, or I'm buying dinner or whatever. And then you regret it later is what happens, right? But you enjoy treating people, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with this type of behavior. It's great to be, able to do that for other people and spend on other people. It's a wonderful trait to have. The drawback is it can get you into a situation where you have either depleted savings or you wind up in debt that you just keep snowballing that effect. Because you're not paying attention to how much is being spent or when it's being spent. And one of the ways to balance this out, right, is unlike with the hippie where we would just say, tracking or other people, about understanding what you're spending. In the case of a spendthrift, it might be actually putting that full force budget in place, right? Really getting a handle on what the spending should be, and then how you can fit that in. The other, and we'll talk about this a lot with this couple of the different personalities, but we do this whole thing on wants versus needs, right? So the delaying that gratification. If you really want to buy something, can you delay it? Can I wait, 1 or 2 days? This cool off period, right? A cooling down period. Can I just, all right, God, I'm going to go buy this. No. Can you just step back and say, wait, I'm going to wait and do this tomorrow or the next day? And if I still feel the same about it, okay, maybe then I'll purchase. But just putting that buffer in place will help sort of stop some of this behavior and some of that spending. The hustler, the money hustler to be exact, right? It's all about getting money. It's all about making more money. It's all about increasing your income. It's all about creating wealth, accumulation. Everything about you is look at me based on what I earn, what I have. That's where the whole personality comes in. I'm all about this. Look how much I make. Look how much I have. That's a money hustler. The drawback here is this tends to override everything else in your life. It tends to be all about the work. It tends to be all about the job. It tends to be all about what you're trying to do, because you're trying to continually accumulate more of that recognition by having more income, by having more wealth, by doing more. So this becomes a really about balancing, really about moderation, right? And we understand making more is not bad. There's nothing wrong with it, except for if it's overriding everything else in your world. You really need to find that time, right? Maybe creating a boundary, doing something that's separating the time you spend focused at work or focused on that, and time you spend with the family or personal activities, right? Maybe finding a way to spend time, like whether it's volunteering or giving to a charity or doing something where it's like, okay, I'm paying it forward, I'm giving back, here's what I'm going to do. Some separation between the two is probably going to help the hustler most of all. The gambler. Gambler is kind of a combination of the hustler and the spendthrift, right? It's sort of a combination of the two. You have, your risk scale is infinite. You're way off the charts in terms of you don't see risk at all in anything that comes up. Probably Bitcoin is probably like, that's a safe bet. I'm plowing money into cryptocurrencies type of thing. But one of the things that does come up is that, sometimes this is a track that happens when, everything else isn't going so great. So I'm going to, take a bet or do something with this money that's kind of risky because I'm trying to gain something else here. The drawback is you tend to put funds at risk that are not meant to be used in that manner. Whether that's, education funds, retirement accounts, down payments that are to be used for the purchase of a home or something like that. The gambler tends to put those funds at risk. And really what you need to do is you need to be setting, this is really truly trying to create that wall between those accounts and your access or usability to them. So if you're somebody who's like, it doesn't matter what it's in, no, throw it all in crypto type of thing, throw it all in Bitcoin. It might be if you have a significant other or have a spouse, having the education funds under their name, so you have no access to them. Your retirement account, but if it's maybe an account that's supposed to be there for the down payment on a home, or buying a car, maybe it's like, okay, I'm going to put it in the spouse's name, so I don't have access to it, so I can't make this crazy, some outlandish bet with it. For Craig and I, we always talk to everybody about risk. It's always about risk. How much risk are you going to take? How much risk are you willing to take? Not return. The gambler goes the other way. The gambler, it's always about return. The roller coaster rider. So you're somewhere between a pack rat and the spendthrift, right? You're the up and down, the swings, money comes, money goes. You're just sort of, all right, I've got it. I saved it up. Now I spent it. And now I'm depressed that I spent it, right? So I got to save it up again. I saved it up again and then I spent it. That's sort of the roller coaster thing. If you're somebody who finds yourself going between these highs and lows, that's a roller coaster rider. You're saving, but then you're spending it and you're feeling depressed about that. So then you're really pushing yourself and focusing on, that's all I have to do. I have to save. And then you go spend it on something and you get thrown off again. Right. So that cycle can really, really create frustration. It can create stress. It can create burnout in terms of how you're dealing with everything. So you really need to be thinking about what you're buying, right? That's one of the first things. What are you spending the money on? Go back to that whole thing about your value. Is this something that's actually in your value system? Is it a purchase that's going to continue or do something for you, the person that you want to be? Right? That's a big part of it. Just because it makes you happy doesn't necessarily it means it's in line with the values that you have. A roller coaster rider really, really needs the delay, right? That wants versus needs things. The delayed gratification here might be as long as like 2 or 3 days, not just 24 hours. You should really be putting a buffer in between you spending money and doing anything else, because that's going to help. That's going to say, wait, do I really need to buy that? Do I really want that? Or, maybe I could do without it and I could just, go get something else instead. That's the best thing that can happen for a roller coaster rider. All right, the Worrywart, right? So it doesn't matter what's the amount, doesn't matter how much the amount, right? It just feels like whatever you have, it's never enough. You're worrying about money all the time. Right? You're constantly in this is the worst case scenario, whatever that, the Chicken Little thing, like the sky is falling, all of that, right? It's always about the focus on the money that you don't have instead of enjoying the moment. And so really you're never going to feel financially free. Right? Financial freedom really is never, it's outside the realm of a worrywart, and something because that constant fear, that constant complaining, that constant worry is never going to let you break out of it. Right? What you need is somebody to help you. A worrywart is somebody who really needs to be going to, whether it's a planner or a financial advisor or somebody who's going to help them sort of get an understanding of where you're at, be able to build that plan out for you, really show you that you're on track, that you're okay, and that there's more of that that's available to you, and not to have that constant stress, that constant worry. The negativity is constantly going to drag you down. But if you can see that whether it's tracking your expenses or the budget, or that you're on track for whatever goal you're trying to achieve, it's going to help. And that, for the worrywart, is the most important thing. Sort of peel some of that or push some of that negative energy, that negative emotion when it comes to your money and finances away. All right. Does any of this feel like you? And you've got, I'm stressed to face how much total debt I need to pay. I don't have a money management system. I don't know how to fast track the payment of my debt. I don't know how to budget without feeling deprived. I don't know how to save. I don't know how to overcome my limiting beliefs. I don't know how to overcome the non-supportive money and debt beliefs, right? Non-supportive. And I don't know how to manage the income I currently have and gradually make my money work for me. So if any of those resonate with you, if any of those connect to you, that's why we're here. Everybody's on the same road. just everybody's got different paths to it. Think of us as like the road trip supervisor for you as you're trying to go down the path and figure it out. That's why we're here. And, we say to everybody, not having a plan is a plan. Your plan is no plan, right? So failing to plan is planning to fail. If you need a little help to get started, you can reach out to us. All you got to do right now is just drop yes into the chat box, right? And we're happy to reach out, happy to have that conversation, but we'll give you our contact information in a second. We also have in the chat box, there's a link to our evaluation form. We do these events for workshops for people all over the state, all over the Commonwealth, all over New England, and actually the country now. God bless, we've even gone international with some of this. That, for trying to stay relevant and topical. So if you can give us a second, just takes about 2 minutes, just fill it out, send it back, let us know that we're relevant in terms of what we do. This is Craig and I in our more formal attire when we're out and about and doing some of these workshops and attending some events out there. So what's on tap? What's coming up with the Think with a Drink over the next couple of weeks? So next week on Veterans Day, 11/11, we're going to do all about life insurance. One thing the pandemic taught all of us is that we're seriously underinsured as the U.S. population and really need to be looking at it. And one of the biggest things is there's confusion about the different types of policies, different type of coverage, and what makes sense for a family or an individual to have. So we'll touch on all of that. We'll just have that conversation. On the 18th, fun and happy stuff going right into the holidays. That's estate planning with long-term care, because you need to be thinking about how you're going to protect out into the future. And long-term care is one of those ways that you can help protect your income, your retirement, your legacy, all the things that you're looking to do. The 25th is Thanksgiving, so we'll just say Happy Thanksgiving. We don't present on holidays, so that's a Thanksgiving, but that's what's coming up, what's on tap, to Think with a Drink. It doesn't appear to be any questions in the chat box, though I'll probably come back to that once I stop the share for anybody on the call tonight, just because without Craig, it's tough for me to do this. But just know, you can go visit the website, www.aresfoundation.org, right? There's a contact us form on there, so you can reach out to us, but you can see all the different things we do. And then if you ever have a question, you can shoot us an email. It's info@aresfoundation.org. And on that note, checking that, I'm going to stop my share and say, have a great evening.